Welcome to the Emblazing Leaders Vodcast. I'm your hostess, Dr. Talisa Sullivan. Join me as we hear from leaders across diverse fields around the world. Hello, Trish. Welcome to Emblazing Leaders with Dr. Talisa. How are you today?
I'm doing great. So nice to see you. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. And I just want to say thank you for continuously engaging in the work we do on a regular basis. You've been a speaker and a presenter for the Quantum 10 conference for a couple years now, and we're hoping to have you back this year too. So I just want to thank you for coming on. And actually, I want you to introduce yourself to our audience on today. To give you an opportunity to just tell us who you are.
Great. And I just want to say the conference is always one of the highlights of my learning in the year. So just the connections, the people. So I look forward to seeing that continue to grow, and I get to keep learning while I'm there. So yes, my name is Trish Keiller. I am the founder at Roots Education, and we are a training organization supporting school leaders in training their staff to really keep up with what we call the trifecta in education, the need for the integration of wellness, well-being, achievement, and the really advancements in technology and the impacts that that's having on the classroom. So we really support leaders in keeping their staff up to date.
Wow, that sounds like everything that we need in the not just the 21st century, but in the 22nd century too. So I'm excited to hear more about your work. That's exciting. So thank you for joining us today. We have a few questions that we designed for today. We want to pour into our audience, our emblazing leaders out there, and just give them some insight on some leadership and some opportunities to just navigate certain space. So you ready for this journey?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I have a few questions for you. I'm just going to start off by asking you how understanding the connection between the brain and body can improve learning outcomes. So what leadership topics would you like to discuss underneath there?
Well, I think there's a few pieces that continue to surface. One is just our orientation to health and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
As often, I think wellness and health sat in a different edge of the school or a different hallway, and achievement sat in a different area. And my experience first as a math teacher, and then after 10 years, I shifted to teaching yoga and mindfulness and nutrition. I really saw sort of this disconnect. And so the work that I brought together, not by intention, I just got laid off from my job. I didn't intend to start a business. So this is sort of part of the journey, but really saw the need for the bridge. And so now, after the pandemic and all of that has surfaced, the divides in the world, the conflict, just the need for wellness on a really deep regulated level, not only in service of learning, but also just in service of health, well-being, and this essence of belonging.
Wow, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about navigating the leadership space. And so if you can tell us, how do you maintain a positive and solution-oriented mindset when facing significant obstacles?
Well, I get a lot of practice right now. A lot of practice. So the answer is practice. And really, I would say that there's really three things that I lean towards. One is the language that we use. So the language that we use both outwardly, how we speak to people, but also really our internal language, how we're speaking to ourselves. So I've done a lot of work in, and also became certified as a neuro-linguistic practitioner in really how our words really shape our lives. So that's such a huge piece for me, and just looking at not only our words, but our energy, the essence of how we're speaking. The second thing is like really deep regulation, like nervous system regulation, embodied wellness, so that in a sped up, what can feel like a chaotic, like unknown space, like how can I slow down so that I create more clarity? And when we're sped up, when we're in a stress response, clarity is not always very accessible. And so we're moving in a reactive space. And so having more time for responsiveness. So deep emotional regulation, really watching the language that we use. And then the third thing and one of the most powerful that I love working with leaders and teachers on is really being mindful of the questions that we ask. So the framing of our question dictates the response. and and really looking at just the brain and like what our focus is and the reticular activating system, that those become the filters through which we seek solution and seek answer. So when I'm in a state or an obstacle, whether that's with the school, whether it's personally with the family, I check in with my language, right? How am I thinking about this? What am I telling myself? I make sure that I get really regulated, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, really taking care of myself. And then thirdly, asking like what kinds of questions that I'm asking, because I know that I'll move in that direction.
Wow, you mentioned like a neurolinguistic, and I haven't heard that. So I want to know, I mean, maybe not for today, or maybe so, but
Sure.
I really got intrigued and I started listening. I mean, I'm always listening first off, but I started listening more intently when I started hearing about the neurolinguistic piece of what you're talking about, because it sounds like what you're saying is that, and based on the three things that you mentioned to us, which it sounds like based on our neural waves, and it's causing us to have like connect with our language, and all of those connections can help us navigate some sort of conversation or dialogue when things are heightened. I don't know if I captured that, but I can you give us those three things, just like one, two, three again, so our listeners can hear those three things that you mentioned?
Yeah, I'll give you those three, and then I'll give you a quick example of the NLP. Okay.
That would be
So
great.
the first one, and not necessarily in any sort of order of importance, but is emotional regulation. So when there's a big situation, like we're looking for leaders to be calm, centered, grounded, and that comes through the nervous system, and that is like deep work that we get to do to support the people around us. It is our language, but the essence of our energy is really felt from others, right? We attune to each other. So when we walk into a room as leaders, it's important that we're just really mindful about what's the energy, what am I bringing to this space, because others are going to attune to me. The
Wow,
second
absolutely.
one, oh, sorry. Yeah. And then the
No,
second
go ahead.
one is the language really being mindful of like, what words am I using in this situation? How am I talking to myself? Um, it's interesting. There's a book called The Upside of Stress, and Kelly McGonigal, I'm not pronouncing her name right, but she talks about like one of the leaders of stress is self-doubt.
Mm,
So as leaders, right, like knowing that is important, and then knowing how to navigate around that we're not alone in that. We're navigating into really a lot of unknown territory, but how do we then work with that within our systems?
mhm.
So a lot of that is the language that we're using, right? Like instead of like, why is this happening to me versus like, oh, what am I learning from this situation that will now transform how I do things. And then the third one was the questions that we ask ourselves, because
Mhm.
we move in that direction. So for example, if we ask questions like, why does this always happen to me, or how can this be happening, we're gonna this the brain will filter that down and keep looking for like that, and so we'll look for all the things that are wrong. It's just like when you're going to buy a car, this is the easiest example, and you start searching for my favorite, the VW Bug, and you're looking for that, and then all of a sudden you see those cars everywhere because
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking for. So our questions are really that important, to be really meticulous with what we're asking of ourselves, of our kids, of our staff, so that we move in that direction. So regulation, language, and the questions that we ask.
Wow, that's beautiful. Oh my gosh. Now I want to talk to our audience, our Emblazing leaders out there. You see why we invite her back to the Q10 conference every year? If you want to get some of this, you might want to, come and show up. And also, she mentioned a business working with districts, I believe. Y'all want to get some of this, because this is amazing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Um,
Can I give you one example? I wanted to give you one
Absolutely.
example when
Sure.
we think about the language. This is a simple example, but all of our words create a chemical response. So
Yes.
when we say things like, I have to do X, Y, or Z, And
Mm-hmm.
and I love even doing this with kids. I do a lot of work at like conferences with teen leaders. What's the energy of have to? And viscerally we just can feel that. It's heavy, it's burden, it's pressure. And that's a chemical response that is then created in the body, that now we're functioning from that space versus I choose to, or I get to. What's the energy of get to? It's honor, it's privilege, it's exciting, it's opportunity, and that's a different chemical response. So our words create a chemical response, and we respond emotionally from that space. So that's why it's so important to really dig into the words, the language that we're using, even with our little kids. I mean, my daughter is 9 years old and she's our guinea pig. We have one child, so the poor thing, she's my guinea pig. But that's her language. She says, I get to go to school, I get to go to practice, right? And sometimes people look at her kind of funny, but that's what she knows, because we're programmed, right? We are programmed. She runs the program that we downloaded to her. And one day she'll want to change her program, just like we all do, right?
I want to say I absolutely love how you position that. It's like, okay, she is already saying I get to, and she is programmed that way, and it's so positive. That's the important piece about it, is that you've programmed her to be positive, and I think that that's what we could use more of.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
exciting.
yeah. Exciting, exciting.
Thank you for the example. I know that our listeners and our viewers are going to want that example, so thank you for that. We're going to switch gears a little, but still stay in, in the leadership space.
Yeah.
So tell us more about like any type of leadership journey, or your leadership journey specifically, that you would like to say shaped you as a leader, like anything that you can think of in your experience. Tell us why you are who you are, the positive Trish Keiller. Is it Keiller? Did I say it right?
Keeler.
Keiller. Thank you. The positive
Yeah.
Trish Keiller that we see before us. Tell us about her.
The biggest impact really on my leadership, excuse me, is from my mom, who was a school administrator, a school principal.
That's awesome.
And I mean, since I can remember as far back as my memories, I spent my summers in schools helping teachers put up their bulletin boards and cut out letters with construction paper, because we used to do that. I've always loved schools. I was a student. I love schools. And that's why I'm so committed to our schools as the place where the world really gets to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And because my mom was a principal, I grew up with educators, like superintendents, just sitting in the house. And mostly what I saw, Talisa, was like their heart, like
Mm-hmm.
the hearts, they're just supersized in educators. They really are. But what I also really noticed, and why I'm so driven to do this work, the principalship, the school leadership, it's not an isolated thing. Like, it's a family affair. This is like a family job. And I mean that because it's 24/7. It doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It's constantly there. And that need and that support is so deep and so rich. And so really, I've been so driven to do this work because it took a toll. It really took a toll, on my mom, on the family, and just working really. And the word I like to work with leaders around is not balance, but it's really harmony, because it's not balance. Like, let's be clear, your family's not getting as much time as your school. It's just not happening that way, right? But there is a way of harmony, more like orchestra. And when we can be really present, and even just the research is interesting with kids, it's not the quantity, it's not the quantity of time, it's quality. So if we can be like super present with them for shorter periods of time, like that's the long game win. And so that's really why I'm just so committed to people who really, I feel like it's a calling in life, and it's not a job, and they get really to be supported in that in ways that they haven't been before. Emotional regulation, nervous system regulation, right? Models of learning and theories. There's so many there. So that is my dear mom is my number one leader.
That is so beautiful. I'm super excited, and I'm sure that your daughter is probably saying the same thing. I can almost hear it in my ears ringing, that uh, whatever her career goals will be inspired by her dear mom. So thank you for sharing your journey and what shaped you. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about advancing in careers. And I know that you mentioned that you hadn't thought that you were going into, your own business, but circumstances happened to send you in that direction. Can you tell us, like, how do you stay updated with the trends and any innovations that in education that ensure that you advance? And I would say advance means, for me, advancement is not necessarily upward movement. This is just my own definition. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily upward movement, it's growth. So what would you say to our emblazing leaders as they advance or move a lateral move, so that they can enhance their career goals?
Yeah. So underneath all of it is deep self-trust
Mm,
in letting go of, I think, the how. Like I always knew, I mean, I was on the path to be a school principal. Like that's what I was going to do, like open up this school. And when I moved from Connecticut after 10 years of teaching in magnet schools in Hartford, Connecticut, out to LA to sort of start checking out more mindfulness, yoga, and I'm still here, and that was 2006.
mhm.
And trusting that even though the goal was the same, the how I was going to get there would vary. And so the biggest things for me have been, one of my yoga teacher, Anna Forrest, she always would say that her favorite students were the new students and the advanced students because they both realized that they didn't know anything, and that really resonated. And so this really humbleness of getting coaching, getting support, finding mentors, saturating yourself with positive messages because it's so easy to be inundated with what's not working. And at the same time, man, all I do is come across with people who are amazing, extraordinary, up to big things, working their butts off to create change. And so I really just stay oriented there. Um, right now, it's easier than ever to access information. I mean, I've had to kind of cut myself out in the car and be like, I'm going to just be silent for this week in the car because I get in the car, the podcast is on, right? Like I'm washing the dishes, the podcast is on. It's like, so that's also another, right, addiction to learning, right? So it's really, again, like this harmony of leaning into get support. I think as an entrepreneur, the biggest challenge for me is just the isolation, the loneliness. And thanks to places like your conference, Talisa, I've just been able to connect with more people, and like Gerard Vargas, like becoming such a good
Yes.
buddy of mine, who we really
Oh,
just lean into each other. Like there's so much need for this work in the world that there's zero competition. I mean, we just all need to be, multiplied so many times to be able to actually support the need. So just keeping the sort of the place of humility, learning, growing, and in service, right? And in service of like how we can support each other. But so many opportunities to learn right now. It's incredible. It's incredible.
wow. Thank you. You know what? I don't know if it's on the topic of career growth, maybe it is, but I just loved hearing you talk about the connections that you make and how there's room for multiple. So many times in leadership, we experience individuals who think that there can only be one. When you talk about social emotional learning, or if you're talking about neurodiversity, or if we're talking about leadership in general, the equity work, you know, um, people sometimes think that there can only be one, so they minimize, the competition, so to speak, and things like that. But I love hearing you say that, there's so much room, for collaboration, and it really, really speaks to your leadership. So
Mm.
thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that in. And what I'm really excited about is hearing that you've connected with individuals at the Q10 conference, and that y'all have become like colleagues and friends and things like that. It's really a testament of the work that we do together collectively that ensures that everyone has a village. Because you also mentioned a little bit earlier about how lonely it can be in entrepreneurship, right? And so this gives you an opportunity to truly connect with colleagues that are like-minded. So
Yep.
I'm super excited that you're connecting on that level, and I'm hoping that everything that we do gives you the opportunity to continue to connect, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny because when I think about sort of as an educator thinking about being an entrepreneur, like it never entered my consciousness, like literally, right? My family's educators, my brothers were off doing that, right? It's like the boy thing to do.
Mhm.
Um, and then when you get into it, you realize like, oh man, this is like a spiritual journey. Right? Because and what I think is so powerful that also supports me in supporting our leaders, you got to coach yourself every day. Like, and I know that the principalship can be very lonely,
Right.
right? Because you're holding a lot, but the communities, like the amount of people, accountability for so many families, the community, the teachers, the staff, with all the things that, and here's the big piece when I started my business, it's like schools with wanting their test scores to go up, right? And feeling
Mm.
like if the test scores aren't there, like we can't do this other stuff yet, right? We're like waiting for joy and happy and celebration until it gets there. And so when I started my business, it was like I was having that experience of like, oh wait, but I wasn't bringing any money in the beginning. Like, how was I supposed to be joyful and happy and celebrating? And I was like, oh, I get to experience what our leaders experience. And so now I speak to that in like such an embodied way because we coach ourselves as
Mhm.
leaders. If we're not coaching ourselves, like we can go outside as much as we want, but until we're taking ourselves on, taking our ego on, sitting with ourselves, questioning every thought that we've had, right? We're just not going to be in optimal service that we're capable of.
Right. I love this conversation because it actually it might deviate a little bit, but I heard you mention like you were talking again the entrepreneurship, and it really made me think about my own journey as well. And I too, didn't grow up with thinking that entrepreneurship was a thing. We were taught 9 to 5. You work a 9 to 5 because that's what's going to pay your bills. You got to make sure you have insurance, that type of stuff. So for me to venture off as well, because I'm venturing a little bit here and there still while I work a 9 to 5, just because sometimes it's scary to just jump feet first.
So
But
scary.
especially if you don't have to, because it sounds like you were kind of pushed into it a little
Yeah.
bit.
I was not jumping. I was just like surviving and like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll try this. How hard can it be? Everyone who's not an entrepreneur was like, that's a great idea. My one friend who was an entrepreneur was the only one who said, are you sure you want to do this? Right? Everyone else like,
Yeah, yes, and that's like, yeah, you gotta dip your toe in if you're able to dip your toe in so you can see how it works. But
yeah,
but I'm happy that it's working, because what I know that you'll probably find is a little freeing, because you get a chance to. I mean, many of us show up as our authentic selves anyway, but there are sometimes when you're in a position where you might not be able to say that or do that. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, you can say that and do that, and if they don't want you, then they just don't hire you. And then you go to the district or the school site or the community center that does want to hear exactly what you're going to say. So
yeah,
that's the exciting part about it. You really truly get to be your authentic self, and you get a chance to lead and guide and pour in like nobody's business. So that's
yeah,
exciting work.
yeah, yeah.
I'm going to go into some general leadership insight. So if you could, what practices do you
Excuse me.
follow to ensure that your actions consistently align with your values and the principles of a servant leader?
Great question. Because it's an ongoing practice. And I think that's the biggest thing, that as leaders, we have to stay in the practice, not that there's an outcome. For me, those biggest pieces are my faith and spirituality, and making sure that, the ego is so interesting, right? The ego keeps us here, keeps us alive, gets us out of bed in the morning. And the ego gets to also be in harmony because, yes, right? If a district all of a sudden is like, oh, we're going to pivot, which happens,
Mhm.
right? We pivot, we get new leaders, like, oh, we have a new leader, we're not going to continue with this work, those kinds of things. The ego is there and present and having an experience. And so really working with self-compassion, right?
Mhm.
Not guilt, blame, shame, all of those pieces. So for me, reading history, Ryan Holiday is a constant lean in for me. His work in Ego is the Way, and the obstacle is the ego is the enemy, the obstacle is the way, stillness is key. All of his work, and keeping me rooted in really just that my ancestors. I mean, calling them in my meditations and knowing what they've weathered and what they took on, so that, it just makes me kind of teary that I could be here doing this work that's hard work, but was paved from the work that they did, so that I was able to do that. People, right? Like networks of people, knowing when I need to, like yesterday, I called my mentor. Right? Like, I just need to hear your voice. So knowing who those people are, really protecting your boundaries of who pours into you. And when you're feeling really depleted, I think one of the hardest things for me, and I know this about our school leaders too, I often have this conversation with them, we're like a lot of like type A people, like we came out of the womb ready to work, people, we're like, let's go. What needs to be accomplished today? I got my list. I'm ready to go. And that also can sometimes, and this happened, with my mom who passed 7 years ago, just it's too much on the system, and not being able to create regulated, calm, be okay with not working. So our kind of addiction to hard work and what we've held that as, is a place really to explore, right? Of course, there's hard work, but there's also rest and repair that athletes are really good about building that into the system. As schools and leaders, like, we're not as good as, like, the repair is part of the process. So our
Right.
kids move from class to class to class, the bell, the shift, right? Everyone's trying to get through the day versus like building in the 1 minute of like my system moving from math to chemistry, and seeing 12 kids in the hallway who I have an experience with also, right? That I get to digest, that could have felt like a lot. And I feel like I started going a tangent right there, but I will summarize, right? Like reading, spiritual practices, people, and then really taking care of yourself and taking care of your, I think one of the biggest places is like self-compassion and like forgiveness of self, because we're making decisions, moving fast. A lot of people, and pleasing everybody doesn't work. Sometimes we come up short and we get to apologize, and sometimes we got to lean into hard conversations.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, no, you were not going on a tangent. I was going to say I was listening intently. I
Okay.
was picking up I was picking up so many different things that I just, I know our listeners, I know our viewers are going to be totally inspired, just by, ensuring that you align with those practices. One of the things that I heard that I think we often forget is I heard you say, like, to give ourselves, well first to, give ourselves grace is kind of what I heard. Then also we talked about giving ourselves space to, like, re-energize, even if it's a minute, is kind of what I heard, like a minute, like re-energize, moving from one content area to the next. If we're talking about our students, our kids, give them a moment to kind of settle in before you go from math to English, from science to history. And then if we're talking about ourselves as leaders, give ourselves an opportunity, because teacher leaders in the classroom were jumping from one class period to the next class period, and we didn't give ourselves that time to breathe. And I remember being an activities director, and as you were speaking about giving ourselves that moment, I remember not having any time to actually breathe,
Mm,
because I was so adamant about allowing for my kids to have that space that they needed to breathe, that I didn't give it to myself. And I only thought about that in this one moment. I never really thought about it before, but I'm having a visual of the moment I realized that I needed to figure out, how do I give myself some space. I was probably in as an activity director for years, and then I remember the kids would come in through the front door. They would all come in through the front door, and so, like, there would always be someone in the space with me. So it was
mm,
like, okay, so the door was revolving, so I couldn't even get out to use the restroom. It was like
yep.
crazy. And so I started figuring it out. I was like, okay, I got to tell the kids, we got to do something different. I was like, all right, everyone out the back door. So I started making sure people left out the back door so that the front door would be locked. That would give me an escape moment so that I can escape out the
Right.
back door and breathe, even if it was just to, like, take in some fresh air, because it was nonstop. So I'm hearing you tell our leaders to give yourself that time, that space, give our kids that time, that space to re-energize, even if but just for a minute. So I
Yeah.
hope I captured a little bit of what you poured in.
Yeah, and I will say this, I think probably the most important thing in schools is that we are very oriented to a pathology framework versus a health paradigm.
Mhm.
So the health paradigm, and kind of what you're speaking to, when we think about self-regulation, right, this is sort of a big word, emotional regulation, right, in our schools and social emotional learning. But the body is the self-regulator. The body does it. The body is doing it. And we think that we're doing.
Mhm.
So all we do is nudge the body, right? We give it a little bit extra water. We get some sunlight, right? We
Mhm.
get the vitamin D, but we're not doing all of the processing, right?
Right.
We get our sleep, the body's doing the repair, the rejuvenation, right? The restoration. And
Mhm.
so there's an ease when we're oriented to health, because then we understand like we're not doing. So us taking like a minute with the class, like to let everybody breathe. And I think that because we're so oriented to things being hard and complex, that we dismiss simple because it just feels too easy, because ultimately, and I don't want to go too deep here, but we're trying to earn our worth.
Yeah.
We're trying to earn our worth instead of just receive it. So it's a deep place to go, but it's really interesting when we think about self-regulation almost like a gardener, right? We pull the weeds. It's like those are the negative thoughts, right? We pull those out. We give it some water, we give it some fertilizer, right? We feed ourselves nutrient dense food, but we're not doing it. And we're really in receivership. And when we can rest back in that and know, how do I just set the conditions in my school or classroom that me giving staff a minute like after school to like jump into this downloaded agenda when they're needing to digest 18 situations that just happened in the day. I don't have to do anything except create and hold a container for them to be still, take a moment, let them connect with each other, right? So oxytocin flows, and now all of a sudden, right, the body is getting more regulated. So health paradigm is a big piece of what I'm working with schools on, shifting to out of pathology, so much hard work, so that the work becomes easier. We could work where we need to work and use the body as really the tool to support us.
Yeah. Wow, this is some good work. I know that the schools and districts that you work with are like just loving this shift. I think because, you know, something that you're saying, we're taking it from a different perspective. We're not jumping right into content, you know, like we've done in the past. We're not doing school the way we've always done school. What we're pushing for schools and districts is to allow for that space, that time, that space, those energizers, those ignites. We ask teachers to do that in their lesson, but then we forget when we get into a staff meeting that we need to do the same thing, that we have to have time for connecting. So I appreciate you bringing that back to the forefront, and I hope that our viewers and our listeners that are leading schools, districts, community centers, or whatever your leadership, you know, organization is, hear us saying that we really need you to give people an opportunity to connect as humans first
Yeah.
before we start to dig into the content. So thank you for that. I'm enjoying this conversation so much, and I have more questions, but we're almost at the end of it, and I'm sure
Yeah.
this won't be the last time that we engage, because I know that we're both in Southern California, and
Yes.
we're on Zoom. But when I do get a studio up and going, I'm gonna have you back, and we're gonna sit down with some tea, maybe coffee, whatever we want to drink, just tea or coffee though, nothing other than that. As we and engage in another conversation at some
Love it.
point.
Love
But I
it.
want to go with future forward. So I want to ask you, what advice would your younger self give to the leader sitting here before us today?
Stop trying to prove yourself. Stop trying to prove yourself and just do the work. Just keep doing the work.
You know what? You can give that to all of us, because one of the things that society makes us do is prove our worth. And your work, I'll say for sure, Trish, speaks for itself. So I'm glad that your younger self would give yourself today that advice. And I'll say that all of us, and to all of our listeners out there, your work speaks for itself. You don't have to prove yourself. You heard it from Trish. You're hearing it from me. Be yourself, be your true authentic self, and stop trying to prove yourself, because you are amazing just how you are. Well, Trish, I'll say that this is not goodbye. This is until we continue our conversation in person with some coffee or tea in an Emblazing studio. I don't have one right now, but when we have one, I am forever grateful to you for your work, the work that you're doing for our schools and our districts. I'm so grateful that you choose to come to the conference and present for us on a regular basis. I'm looking forward to having you back. I'll give you those dates. And I know that you have a business. I would love for you to tell our listeners and our viewers where they can reach you. What services do you offer? Can you give us a little bit more insight, and we will be enlightened, and I'm sure they're going to grab that information as quickly as they can.
Sure, sure. So two places. My website is rootseducation.com, roots-education.com. The main services, professional development, training, coaching for teachers, and then leadership support to be able to fulfill on that work with teachers. Obviously, outcome is students, but our teachers need to be thriving for our students need to be thriving, as do our leaders. And some of the work that I do is also work with teenagers, bringing just the practices and the tools through conferences. A lot of that work comes through Mental Health Awareness Month. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn, posting content, and certainly reach out and get in touch that way.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. And to our Emblazing leaders out there, keep being great, and we will catch you on the next Emblazing Leaders. Trish, thank you so much, and have a great, great day, evening, night, whatever it is for any of you. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate you.
Absolutely, 100%.